Would the White Sox have looked any different had they not drafted Andrew Vaughn? Let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSide Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, a listener asked in the comments, why is there so much Andrew Vaughn criticism, especially on this show? Well, one reason to point out is the Sox passed on some other talented players in the 2019 draft that could have changed the complexion of this team that I want to discuss in the first segment. Then Mark Buehrle is going to get a statue. Let's discuss why that might be the highest honor he receives for his great career. And finally, today's Minor League Monday report is focusing in on MLB Pipeline updating their top 100 rankings. Let's discuss where 6 prospects for the Sox now rank. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right. So for those still supporting Andrew Vaughn, I just can't do it anymore. I'm sorry, guys. I'm out. I tried for 4 years. I was on the hope train with Andrew Vaughn. I was banging the drum that he was going to make the All-Star team last year, and this isn't just being like jilted by a bad prediction. It's just he's replacement level. After 4 seasons, that's what he is. He is what he is now. You know, he's not capable of being the next great first baseman and an iconic position for the White Sox. He's just a replacement level player. And think about it. He helped, his struggles at the beginning of the season, especially with Yoan Moncada, Eloy Jimenez, and Luis Robert Jr. down. He needed to step up in 2024, and he didn't. His struggles in the first half of the season, along with Andrew Benintendi, was a big, big reason why the White Sox ended up having an historic losing season. And that's why he's starting to get some heat, because more and more people are waking up to the fact that he's not going to take the torch from Jose Abreu, who took the torch from Paul Konerko. Also, first base, honestly, it's not a value position anymore. It's not like it was when Paul Konerko was manning it and was a franchise icon. More and more teams are realizing, heck, you just need some power and a guy who can catch the ball. And in the case of Andrew Vaughn, he's not providing a ton of power, and also he's not very good defensively at a position where it's not like you have to be elite. You just got to be able to catch the ball half the time. That's a big point. And then if something gets hit, from a left-hander down the line, try to be able to field it. But when you take a first baseman in the top 5, he better turn out to be a stud hitter in the big leagues. And that was the vision when Vaughn was taken number 3 overall in the 2019 draft. And so far, replacement level production. Pretty much production that you might be able to get out of Tim Elko. So why I'm also now on the criticism side of Vaughn is the Sox might at least look a little bit different had they taken a different player. They did pass on some promising other prospects in the 2019 draft. Now, obviously, Adley Rutschman and Bobby Witt Jr., they're off the board. So you can't get on the Sox for taking them. In fact, it's really hard to compare the Sox, Andrew Vaughn, to those two, because while, yes, Andrew Vaughn was the Golden Spikes winner, he was raking in college. I mean, Bobby Witt Jr. and Adley Rutschman were more elite than Andrew Vaughn. It was like those two were definitely cornerstone players in the draft. And then it was, make your best educated guess to get a potentially at least a solid baseball player. Also, you can't get on the White Sox because they just did not lose enough in 2018. One moment. Sorry, folks, still battling this cold that I had last week. But in 2018, the White Sox just didn't lose enough. They lost 100 games. They did their best. But Baltimore lost 115. Kansas City lost 104. So, hey, even the Sox can't tank right, as you can see. They can't even tank right now. 121 losses after losing 100 in 2023 means they were ineligible for the number 1 pick. They just can't do losing right. But still, a top 3 pick that should have set up the White Sox for a long-term core player. And, kind of that was the belief with Andrew Vaughn. But also they could have had Riley Greene, now a solid anchor for the Tigers. Could have had CJ Abrams, who made the All-Star team this past season, or Josh Jung, who made the AL All-Star team and won a World Series with the Rangers in 2023. And yes, hindsight is 2020. But honestly, outside of Rutschman and Witt Jr., only Corbin Carroll has really played up to being a foundational player. But at the same time, Young, Abrams, and Greene have at least accomplished more in terms of what they're bringing to the table to help their franchise win, or at least put the arrow pointing up. And I'm not going to get on the White Sox for not taking Corbin Carroll. He was taken 16th overall. You got to give the Sox some grace in that other teams were not sure on Carroll either, that he'd be this type of player. So you can't get on the White Sox for that. But you can get on them for passing on two high school prospects like Greene and Abrams, because they wanted a guy that could help right away, or that was going to get to the majors quickly, because that was the one thing about Andrew Vaughn. They went with a first baseman who, had accolades, but he did not have any special traits except he'd get to the big leagues quickly. I mean, that's what it was. And I've always maintained with a first baseman, if you're drafting them that high in the draft, they better have special traits. One moment. They better be like physically freakishly tall like Frank Thomas. They better be like, the sons of greats like Prince Fielder, or even, again, a potential two-way player, even though he's going to be a first baseman, but like Jack Caglione. But otherwise, Andrew Vaughn just screams, hey, accomplished player, but run-of-the-mill first baseman. That's what they should have had. And here's what MLB wrote about Vaughn's selection in 2019. While there was some thought that the White Sox might prefer an up-the-middle player, they didn't overthink it, and they grabbed the best all-around hitter available. If there's a player in this draft who's most likely to hit 300 with 30 home runs on an annual basis, it's Vaughn. Yes, he's a right first baseman who isn't very tall, but so is Jeff Bagwell. Okay, well, Bagwell hit bombs, and Vaughn still has not produced in that area. He's still not crushing home runs. He's not hitting 300 with 30 home runs. And also think about that now. 5 years ago, we were still focused on, hey, guys got to, this guy could hit 300. Now it's more, get bat to ball skills, but it's more walk rate. It's more OPS. Again, it's more home runs. It's more the overall picture. Hitting 300 is great, but it's not the end all be all anymore, folks. It's OPS, like I said. It's WRC plus. It's looking at all those things. And that's the reason why I think, Andrew Vaughn gets criticized, is because, and it's not necessarily his fault. You got to give him some grace, but the front office looked at it so narrow, just like they did with Nick Madrigal. But I'm not going to get on for Nick Madrigal, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But, earlier in 2024, MLB Pipeline did revisit the 2019 draft, and they did say Vaughn was still the best pick of the 2019 draft, but that just shows you how bad the White Sox drafted. But here's what they wrote. Vaughn reached Chicago as quickly as expected, but he hasn't really lived up to the expectations that came with getting drafted third overall out of California and signing for a franchise record $7.2 million. The 2018 Golden Spikes Award winner was one of the best offensive prospects in college baseball from the last decade, yet he's a career 249, 308, 407 hitter with 56 home runs in 460 big league games and is struggling in 2024. Again, that was earlier in the 2024 season. Obviously, I think he's up to 70 home runs now at that point. But when you look at it again, Vaughn, and then say, here's what MLB Pipeline wrote about Greene when he was drafted. The Tigers' interest in Greene was no secret. Most clubs considered him the best pure high school hitter in this class, and his power is an asset as well. He's going to be a corner guy, maybe a left fielder, but that bat should really play well. And then this is when they circled back 5 years later. You can certainly make an argument for Kerry Carpenter's journey from 19th round to 20-homer hitter in the majors here, but we'll stick with Detroit's selection at number 5 overall for his overall production to this point as a cornerstone for the franchise. Still only 23. Greene, an owner of an 111 OPS plus in the majors, grades out well with his bat speed, loud contact, barrel rate, and approach in the majors, and he's impressive defensively since moving full-time to left field. He remains a key part of Detroit's pursuit of a postseason return. So think about that. Not only does Greene help them make it a miraculous run to the postseason, but Greene also helps them win a playoff series. Andrew Vaughn didn't do that. And also, again, I would say at least you got to wonder where the White Sox currently would be if they had Greene, if they went with Greene. Because I would at least say they have a cornerstone player. At least you could say, okay, we got one guy. Maybe he's just going to be, 2 or 3 F4, but he's still a guy that we know is going to be in our lineup for the next couple of years, a guy that we could build a team around. Whereas Vaughn, you don't know if, this is his last shot. I'm thoroughly convinced because this is his last year of club control. Also, this is probably going to be his last year on the team. Either, if he does live up to the hype, he's probably getting traded. Because again, the White Sox are at asset collection time now. I know there's people saying build the team, but you still have to collect more assets, a whole heck of a lot more assets. And if you're going to build a team with guys that have a clean club control clock there. 1 second. Sorry, folks, playing hurt here. Now, Greene does have less homers with 40 career dingers, but he also has less seasons, and he's got the higher OPS and a better career B-WAR. And he's 24 because they took him out of high school. And honestly, a high schooler would have been a good idea to draft since he would have been part of a second wave of prospects. It just shows you. They thought, well, Vaughn's going to get to the majors quickly. So then he came up when all the core pieces came up, basically. So there was no second wave. And if you want to sustain a competitive window, you've got to have a second wave. You either have to have a second wave because you're going to use that to trade to get a piece that helps you put over the top, or you're going to get reinforcements. And they didn't get that in the competitive window. CJ Abrams, and think about that too. Second wave, CJ Abrams was used to get the Padres Juan Soto. Now, not saying that the White Sox would have gotten Juan Soto, but again, that's my example. And he's a core piece now of the Washington Nationals, who have the arrow pointed up. Here's the write-up that the MLB.com had when he was drafted. As expected, the consensus top 6 position players went as the top 6 picks of the draft. That's a record for the most hitters selected to start any draft. Abrams is one of the best athletes and fastest runners in the high school crop, and he also has solid hitting ability with some sneaky pop. There's little debate as to whether he's a shortstop or a center fielder in the long run, but he can make an impact at either position. And then here's what MLB Pipeline wrote about him 5 years later. After being selected, San Diego had high hopes when it selected Abrams 6th overall in the 2019 draft, and it kept him on an accelerated timeline with a major league debut at just 21 years old in 2022. The shortstop was a key piece of the Juan Soto trade later that year, and he's in the midst of a breakout age 24 season. Now with the Nationals, thanks to improved power and continued elite speed, he'll be a key piece of Washington's core and hopeful return to contention. And again, another high schooler. Could he have provided the second wave impact or even provided the Sox, at least at this point, a cornerstone player? I would say yes. Now, for those who are like, well, Abrams had a terrible second half. Yeah, he was the exact opposite. Well, him and Vaughn kind of had opposite seasons. Vaughn struggled in the first half, had a pretty solid second half. Where Abrams had a great first half, made the NL All-Star team, and then was terrible in the second half. But still, Abrams, higher upside player, plays shortstop. And then Josh Jung, he's only played one full season. But even then, the third baseman, and again, that's if you're going to deviate from going up the middle, a third baseman is much better to take than a first baseman because, again, they don't work out at third base. You can move them to first base. There's a little bit more, defensive versatility. The White Sox tried Andrew Vaughn in right field and left field, and my God, that was a failure. But he, Jung has already gotten to an All-Star game and won a World Series. So here's what the MLB.com summary was when Jung was drafted. I thought Jung was a little underrated coming into the draft, but apparently he wasn't if he's going 8th overall. After Rutschman and Vaughn, Jung is the next best all-around hitter in the college class. He's hit for more average than power so far, but I think there could be 25 homers in there per season once he turns and lifts more pitches. He's a little bit of an underrated defender at third base, and the Red Raiders have also played him at shortstop this season. One moment. And then here's what they wrote 5 years later. Though injuries delayed Jung's arrival in Texas, last year he became the first Rangers rookie ever to start in the All-Star game and started in the postseason as the franchise won its first ever World Series championship. The number 8 overall pick out of Texas Tech got off to a 7-for-17 start with two homers in 4 games this April before an errant pitch broke his right wrist. Plus he plays third base. Again, a lot more value in the draft for someone who rakes than a first baseman. Because the only other options for, a first baseman, if they can't field, is DH. Really. And again, we saw what the White Sox tried with Andrew Vaughn in the outfield, and it was just a complete failure. But the reason I focus in on Vaughn was he got to the big leagues first, and he's been nothing more than replacement level. Had the Sox taken a longer view, especially on roster projection and roster construction, and 6-7 years, they would have realized maybe it was better to go high school or young because he plays third. And again, I was going to hammer the Sox in this segment for also taking Nick Madrigal a year before, but honestly, you can, because if you look at that draft class, it was actually terrible. So I'm not going to get too much on the White Sox because, yes, Jonathan India was there too, and he's having a fine career because he went literally right after Madrigal, but that's about the only criticism you can have because you got to go down to Nico Horner, who went to the Cubs at 24 to find the most productive player so far in that class. So you just can't get too upset because, yeah, and he is a solid player, while Madrigal is probably going to be a career 4A player, but it's still a terrible draft to find a cornerstone player. And why does that matter? Because those were the two drafts that the Sox had top picks in, top 5 picks that you're supposed to use when tanking was allowed to find long-term cornerstone players. And guess what? They just found a replacement level player and a guy that they traded away for Craig Kimbrell. Well, the White Sox are going to be honoring Mark Buehrle. The team announced at Sox Fest he's getting a statue outside right field. Let's discuss why that might be the highest honor he gets for his storied career next on Locked On White Sox. Being a Bears fan means you don't get to see many playoffs games. I was lucky enough, though, as a kid to see the Bears play in a few live and in person with my dad. Took me to Old Soldier Field there. And I actually got to see the Dallas Cowboys beat the Bears as they started the 1990s Dynasty March. Looking back, it was actually, even though it kind of stunk to see the Bears lose, it was still neat to see Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin take their first steps towards winning those Super Bowls. In one moment. And if you want to catch major events live, like playoff games, might I suggest using the Gametime app. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, it may not be an NFL game, but I've been telling my brother-in-law, who wants to get tickets for this weekend's Marquette versus UConn game, 2 top Big East teams, battling out, that he should use the Gametime app to find tickets since that game is sold out at the Fiserv Forum. You get a panoramic view of the seat you intend to buy, plus all-in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout. That's what I've been telling them about. So, and plus, you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Because what time is it? Game time. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, playing a little hurt. Been battling this cold for almost a week. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so the White Sox are definitely going to get a sellout or at least a very good crowd on July 11th. Because that's the day the Sox will unveil Mark Buehrle's statue. That was one of the main things to come out of Sox Fest. No, Ozzie Guillen's number 13 is not getting retired. Instead, it's just going to be Mark, I shouldn't be like, it's just going to be. I mean, it's a huge honor. Mark Buehrle's going to get a statue outside of right field. And, that's the second thing you do on the checklist of honoring one of the best pitchers that the Sox have ever had. Obviously, check mark 1 was retiring his number 56, and this is step 2. In terms of honor number 3, that's sort of out of their control until it gets to a committee, because that's where I think Mark Buehrle's going to get into the Hall of Fame is I don't think he's getting voted into the Hall of Fame, at least not by the BBWAA. The baseball writers are not going to vote him in. I'm sorry. And it's not because he's deserving. I fully agree. And a lot of White Sox fans, especially me too, like the moment you even bring that up, well, the writers aren't going to vote him in. Well, he deserves it. Yes, he deserves to be in, but you got to remember, a lot of these baseball writers that vote have really weird voting rituals and quirks. But first, let's again review what qualifies him to be a Hall of Famer. 5-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner, 58 career B-WAR, 58.1 career B-WAR, pitched a perfect game and a no-hitter, took the ball for 200 innings or more in all but 2 of his 16 big league seasons. And one of them, his final season, he fell just a few innings short of throwing 200 innings. Won the 2005 World Series and was part of a rotation that absolutely dominated the postseason. And he also got a save in that series. And the guy had been drinking beers in Game 3 because he wasn't supposed to be pitching. Game goes 14 innings. They need him to get to that final inning. He comes in, gets a save. Over 200 victories. When pitchers getting wins, it was actually sort of a thing. At least deserving it. Like when they were, I was like, you could point and be like, yeah, Mark Buehrle went out, pitched 6-7 innings. The White Sox won because he pitched well for 6-7 innings. In today's day and age, it's starter goes 5. That's why I don't count wins anymore. I just don't. If you guys notice that, I don't mention wins at all with any of today's pitchers. Garrett Crochet was a stud, only had 6 wins. Why? Well, half the reason was towards the end of the season, he was only throwing 4 innings. So that's the other thing. You get these guys on these pitch counts, all that type of stuff. But when Buehrle pitched, wins did mean something. And then you see how his qualifications compare to CC Sabathia, who just got voted in. You got to think, well, Buehrle should have a shot. Buehrle had a 3.81 career ERA. Sabathia has a 3.74 ERA. CC's B-WAR is 62.3 and 251 wins to Buehrle's 214 wins. But here's where CC deviates and gets into the Hall of Fame. Played for the Yankees. Okay, just kidding, sort of. No, CC has a Cy Young and over 3,000 strikeouts. If Buehrle had one of those, I think he would have already been in. I think he would have been voted in. But he was never a flamethrower, and he finished no higher than 5th. He's likely just to be considered Hall of Very Good by the BBWAA writers. And you have to take into their weird voting habits. Like, there's literally a voter out there that didn't think Ichiro Suzuki was worthy of a Hall vote. Only Mariano Rivera has been unanimously voted into the Hall. Okay, think about that. A closer. One of the best closers of all time, obviously, but like Ken Griffey Jr. didn't get unanimously voted in. Ichiro doesn't get unanimously voted in because for some reason, it's like it can't be a thing. You can't have a unanimous selection, except for some reason, Mariano Rivera. It's just strange. It's just weird. Like Nolan Ryan, come on. That was a Hall of Famer. He should have gotten in. Like there's a lot of those guys on the ballot. It's like, how are you not voting? And some of them, too, they have these weird voting habits where they're like, okay, I don't want to vote for Ken Griffey Jr. because I want to give a bunch of, votes to other guys that I think should get in that might not get in. And one of the reasons why I think that it's so silly is you have voters who just don't make all 10 selections. I have a ton of respect for those that actually use all 10 of their selections. You get 10. Fill out all 10. It's just 10 circles, 10 check marks. But you get them, they're like, I'm only going to put 4. I'm only going to put 5 because that's all I see on this list. I know it's not everybody should get a trophy, but we are talking about some great players, and we are talking about an honor. And I think we have to really rethink, especially now in today's modern era, of what makes a Hall of Famer. Yes, 30, 40 years ago when guys were, 100 years ago when guys were throwing 9 innings every game, Mark Buehrle is not a Hall of Famer. But the game has evolved now to the point where maybe it doesn't make sense to have your pitcher go through the lineup a third time. In a lot of cases, Mark Buehrle was good enough to go through a lineup a third time. So I think we have to do that. And plus, where Buehrle is in terms of his vote total, history is not on his side in terms of getting in and making up that ground. Although Billy Wagner getting in helps the Hope cause, as he was 3 times during the voting process of all of his 10 years. He did get under 15%, and he just got in on his final shot. But he's the only one to ever do that. It's the first time. And Buehrle just received 11.4% of the vote this year, 3 percentage points better than 2024, and it's going to keep him on the ballot. However, Wagner, again, is the only one to overcome those odds, to overcome that gap, because you got to get to 75%. That is a huge gulf that Mark Buehrle has to make up. And plus, Buehrle was trending towards 12.7% before the final vote tally was released. And by 12.7%, he was trending towards, that was all the known ballots before, obviously, all of them, when people, basically there is a tracker I forget the name of the website, but the guy tracks all this. And that's where Buehrle was at. At least of the known, voters who released their ballot. And he actually dropped. And that also supports my theory that Hall of Fame voters don't go to all 10. They don't use all 10 selections. So I just think he'll always be viewed by the outside of the White Sox community as a Hall of Very Good. He's likely going to have to go to the Eras Committee like Harold Baines and Dick Allen did. And that could be a long way, just ask Tommy John. Well, the White Sox are really leaning into this recent MLB Pipeline Top 100 rankings coming out. Let's go over the updated rankings that the Sox have. Should that be something that the Sox should celebrate? Let's go over that next on Locked On White Sox. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, where they get their podcasts. This show's available on all major podcast platforms. Again, I hope you had a great weekend. Mine was spent a lot in bed. I'm still battling this cold. I think a plague is going through our house. My daughter's sick. My wife is sick. I really appreciate everybody being patient with me as I battle through this cold, but I still want to be here for you because this is one of the few podcasts that actually is talking White Sox baseball 5 days a week. And that's not to like toot my horn. It's just that's what we're here for. We're trying. Although it is the off-season time, so there might be times, again, where if I'm not feeling great, I can take a day off, and I apologize if I do have to do that. But I'm battling through this. I'm trying to feel better. So for those trolls that want to leave me a 1-star review, hey, let's overcome them with a 5-star review because I'm here for you. Try to be here for you as long as I'm able to get out of bed. All right, so the White Sox are out here celebrating having 6 prospects in the MLB Pipeline's top 100. Baseball America also had 8 prospects the Sox have at least getting votes when they compile the top 100 list among their staff. However, Drew Thorpe was part of that list, and he's still only considered a prospect by them. And he didn't make I don't think he made their top 100. He just got votes, but still, the White Sox are, their prospects are very highly thought of now. And that's at least trending where you want to be in a rebuild, that you want the rest of the industry to look at your farm system and be like, hey, you guys got some players. One moment, please. Again, guys, I'm sorry. I'm suffering here. Side note, Thorpe said he had a setback from elbow surgery, but still should be able to throw at some point in spring training. No need to panic yet. And plus, remember, the Sox do have starting pitching depth that if he does have to go on the IL to start the season, at some point you just want him back pitching. That's really what you want. But you really don't see an organization lean into what MLB Pipeline thinks about their system quite like the White Sox. I mean, you got Chris Getz out there talking about it. You got them, putting out, these things on their Twitter account. It's not like you're always seeing a lot of teams being like, hey, MLB Pipeline thinks we have a great prospect system. But hey, the Sox do have to sell something to its skeptical fan base. And one thing that they can sell right now, obviously, is look at our prospects. And I had my buddy Bez on last week to talk about should your hearts be guarded or not. So you want to check out that episode. But in terms of the numbers, here's the updated numbers. Number 16, Noah Schultz, left-handed pitcher. Number 32, Kyle Teal, so he drops a little bit. Number 34, Hagen Smith. Number 39, Colson Montgomery. Number 55, Braden Montgomery. Number 66, Edgar Caro. And then this is what MLB wrote up. MLB Pipeline. The White Sox are tied for third with 6 top 100 prospects. 3 were first-round picks, Colson Montgomery in 2021, and the 2 best lefty pitching prospects in the game now in 2022, Schultz and in 24, Smith. The other 3 arrived in trades. Teal, Braden Montgomery in December package for Garrett Crochet, and Caro as part of the deal with the Angels for Lucas Giolito and Ronaldo Lopez in July 2023. Also, back to me. The Sox also boast Schultz and Smith being considered the top left-handed pitching prospects. Keel and Caro are in the top 10 for pitching. The alarming part, though, is Colson Montgomery dropped out of the top 10 ranking for shortstops. So he's still a top 100 prospect, but he's not a top 10, considered a top 10 shortstop. Honestly, though, I'm not worried because at this point, he's being counted on now to make a contribution to the big league team. He's going to be given every opportunity to make the big league club be the opening day shortstop. or at least in the very near future. GM Chris Getz said that over the weekend. So now for me, what matters is what can you do at the big league level? Can you live up to your Corey Seager-like ceiling? And honestly, the same for Teal and Caro. They're going to be contributing at the big league level, whether it's whether it's at opening day or at some point this season. Now what I care about is what you can do at the big league level. I mean, rankings that, yes, they're nice to see how guys like Brady Montgomery, Noah Schultz, and Smith are still being regarded and how they're being valued and how they're being viewed. And that's the other thing. If Montgomery, Caro, and Teal make the big league roster and play enough, guess what they lose? Prospect status. And then guess what you're down to? Only 3 top 100 prospects. I have a feeling Grant Taylor will eventually get up there too. But still, that's the other reason why you don't always want to celebrate MLB Pipeline having all these top 100 prospects, because guess what? Guys graduate from prospect status. The Baltimore Orioles at one point, I think, had 7 or 8, and now they have 2. Why? Players graduate from prospect status. All right, well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for being patient with me as I battle this cold. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow to discuss actually the sad fall of the core of the 2021 AL Central winning Chicago White Sox team. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding will the Sox future look a little bit differently had they not drafted Andrew Vaughn, Mark Buehrle getting a statue but likely not getting voted into the Hall of Fame, and the Minor League Monday report focusing in on the MLB Pipeline's updated top 100 prospects. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On White Sox, or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.